Hey, this is Juan Escobar. I'm with my friend Austin James, and today we bring you episode 2 of Chop It Up. And today we're just gonna kind of build off of what we started in our last video. And we gave our testimonies there, and we talked about some things we've learned about God and our faith. So, in that testimony, we shared a little bit about some of the or at least I shared a lot about how I had some spiritual disciplines really teach me some things about God. So in that spirit, we're just going to discuss a little more about our own spiritual disciplines. So yeah, Austin, what are some of the spiritual disciplines that have helped you with your faith?
I have three for you, actually.
Okay.
So the biggest one, the biggest way I connect with God is the majority one all Christians do, His Word. So reading the Bible. But one specifically way is just like with preaching, that you can have styles with preaching that are either topical or systematic. And I believe there's readers that kind of prefer how they read and communicate that way about either reading something in the Bible and being very systematic about it or being very topical. But I lean being very topical, and how that kind of happens, of how I feel I even get intimacy with God, is that usually when I'm reading a passage in the Bible, usually a word will jump off the page about God's character that
Yeah.
really interests me or really speaks to a situation in my life that personally affects me. So that's something that is just the staple that's helped me even just always prioritize reading the Bible in my life. The
Yeah.
second one being actually, I'd say this is a little different, but viewing initiating relationships, so initiative as a discipline. So
Okay.
I've done that as far as, talking to the black sheep of a social circle, just learning the interesting things about their personality, or seeing maybe a guy that thinks differently the way I do and
Nice.
challenging him on that, getting to know his story more, seeing where he's coming from, how he came to those conclusions, and really challenging those conclusions. But I think by initiating with someone that you don't necessarily agree with or is different than you, I like that. It's a great discipline to have. It gets you out of your comfort zone. You experience something new, and you experience new things about yourself, about what you agree with and what you grow into. And then lastly, it's kind of a different one too, is I say the discipline of financial giving. By being able to
It's interesting.
minister in ways that you wouldn't normally ever, based on someone having different strengths and gifts, but be able to partner with them financially, I think it's something that has been either not talked about in the church because it's been abused so much because there's been this obsession with it. But I think that's the whole process, is that it needs to be in the life of a Christian to know that we should be as wise as possible with our finances so we can give away as much as possible for the ministry opportunity. So it's the same kind of principle I'll say with initiative, is that giving allows you to experience things you wouldn't have normally never experienced, hear things you would have never experienced, based on partnering with someone else that needed you. And through that need, because I went through a season of fundraising in my life, and I was able to
Yeah.
establish friendships that I would have never had I not had this financial need to survive from society in order to do this work. So I've seen now, as I'm a sender, I've been able to establish these friendships, these connections with other people through the need of financially giving.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think those last two are a little different than what most people think,
I
right?
told you, bro. That's what I was going for. Yeah.
Nice. That's pretty cool. So for me, I would say, yeah, there's the Bible reading, and that's more of uh like the lower tier disciplines that I've been able to be good at, just because um I think my strength has always been prayer, but I found that Bible reading's just kind of been uh the collection of data for me, right? Like, just to be able to collect knowledge and wisdom through being able to read and for some reason it's just I've gotten better at it, but it hasn't been a very good discipline of mine. I've always kind of gone about it how you were saying, more of like the topical angle. If there's ever a need in my life, I would, go find it in the Bible and see was written about a certain topic or maybe a certain emotion, or, maybe I'm feeling like, hey, I could use a story from the Bible right now, I'll go check it out. Um, so I think that's kind of been the way that it's helped me. It's just helped me during a current need, or maybe just to answer a certain question I'm thinking about. And then, as I shared my testimony, there's fasting, right? So when it came down to fasting, really, I think it was just a time to just let go of myself, as far as my desires. I think when I used to do it, because I don't do this much anymore, probably not even do it anymore. I would go to that extent. But I think that I thought there's just like this spiritual connection to God that can be achieved through, disciplining yourself to not eat food. You just put those bodily needs to you sacrifice those, right? Like you don't kind of just, you know, make it a norm for you that day. And so in a sense, it helps you just focus on the task at hand of seeking God, but also realize like, hey, like at the same time, I'm battling this desire of my flesh that needs to be satisfied, right? So hunger, I need to satisfy this hunger, but I'm sacrificing that in order to maybe get a closer connection to God. Um, so I think it's helped to just be able to learn how to sacrifice desires, right? My own needs. So I think that that's been the most helpful in that area. So if ever there comes a point in my life where I need to sacrifice my desires, or we hear about, when you love people, you need to sacrifice your own desires. Like I can relate to that, a little bit. It's like, all right, like I've done it before, I know what sacrifice takes, so it's not easy, but it can be done. And then God works through that. So I've seen that to be very helpful for me. And then as what I would consider my strongest discipline would be prayer. And just, I know I've told you before, man, like the way I experience God in prayer is just very interesting, because I've told you before, it's very vivid for me. It's a very real experience when I'm talking to God, because I do believe I am talking to someone who does answer me. He doesn't answer me in an audible voice, but I know that if not, and I wouldn't say like I get answered immediately, but there will be a point where I do get an answer to my prayer, and so I will have the awareness to understand when that answer comes. And so, like I told you before, I honestly feel like I'm in the Holy of Holies, right? In the Lord's temple, man. Like I'm literally experiencing God's presence, and I feel just connected to God, and so, um, that took time to get to that point, but because of just my ability to make this discipline very close to home, I think it's just allowed me to just have this really good relationship with God. And I would even say it's almost my lifeline. Anytime that I feel far away from God, it's the one thing that I can turn to and just be reconnected to God and reconnected to this spiritual awareness in my life. So that's how I've just found that to be helpful. It's literally it's literally my phone line to God, just to have a real experience with Him. So, you know, I think also another important thing is to be consistent, right? So, I think that it's important to have the consistency in order to like have a relationship with God, right? Because it's a two-way street, right? It's not just us, seeking this God that doesn't answer, right? Otherwise, it just, why would you even keep with it, right? Like, why would we keep with this relationship if God wasn't real and answering us? So I think that's one reason it's important, because it is a relationship. And so, just as much as God is reaching out to us, we should be reaching out to him in order to have this very strong connection. And also I think just, we have a sports background, so we know the importance of repetition and consistency. So, just the more you do it, the stronger and the better you get at it. So I think that's part of it, but also that becomes part of the way your mind works, right? Like, we're just putting in the reps, and mentally we know this is something important to us. And so we're able to have that at the forefront of our minds when it comes to that. So those are things that I think are important when it comes to consistency with disciplines. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I like your focus on the individual as far as like perfecting what you are, because that's I'm more focused on, because you do having an individual focus, it creates a culture. So like I was saying, I was had this focus of really enjoying connecting with God through the Bible, and I'd even brought up too about through initiating. I find someone that is skeptical about certain things of the Bible, but if I have this consistency, if I'm refining this element of my life of knowing the Bible, then I can help people that also want to grow in their knowledge of the Bible, that want to increase their repetition. They want to fall more in love with reading the Bible too. But also I can be that reflection. I can be that boxing match with the person that doesn't like the thing that the Bible says, that disagree. I can even help them understand on a deeper level about where possibly things have gotten distorted or maybe haven't been presented well to them, where I can offer them that differing opinion that made them go sour on the Bible. But yeah, I just like that idea of it creating a culture, because especially too, we just have been in those awkward environments. And, with my second discipline that has really helped me, that really get remedied when that person shows that initiative, creates that culture. They're that type of person you want to associate with, because they make social situations more comfortable. They include you in conversation. They introduce you to new people. It's a very life-giving persona to have. But yeah, just that consistency, it just includes other people in that. And also too, that last one with financial giving is that it's one of the most uncomfortable things to talk about. But if you can develop and, like you're saying, develop into that type of person that legitimately sees giving as a gift, it's a desire of you, then it makes it all the more a privilege to want to reach out to someone that is about doing that. Because it really just ascends more like, I have to give away money, but when giving turns into partnership language, investment language, when someone views you as a person that sees money in that way, that we're investing towards something greater, it creates this atmosphere of joy to talk to you things about money and present opportunities for you to invest in, when that's where your mindset is. So yeah, that's what I said. I like that you said that, perfecting, refining, that sports analogy. But yeah, I like doing that because it creates a culture where people know where you're at. Oh, he's the Bible guy. He's this dude. He's that. All these titles. And so I think we're always working towards some sort of title. And so I think that has to be consistent about what type of titles do we want to earn? What type of titles do we want people to say about us? And I think consistencies with this discipline earns you that title that you want people to know you as.
Right. That's cool. So I know when I was talking about the prayer discipline, right? Like, I kind of shared how, like, I feel that I'm like actually present with God. So I think what I'm trying to say, there's like a certain type of intimacy that I receive by that discipline. So I can say like the other ones have done the same as well. So I think for me, the because I've gotten better at it now, just being more consistent with my Bible reading. I think that that's even helped, just to have that intimacy with God, because, just having prayer and fasting kind of been my first disciplines. I could say like I was probably more free, what would you call it? Like free form, like just in the spiritual, like in a spiritual manner. Like, I would describe myself like as like the wind, right? Wherever, you know, my life was taking me at that point, like that's how I use prayer and fasting to kind of just help me stay grounded with God, or deal with whatever problems or temptations that would come my way. So when as and not that I never read the Bible back then, right? But it was more for a use, and so coming into a more what we would call the time at Southcrest more systematic, more defined way of reading the Bible, that kind of just helped bring order, I would say, to the way my relationship with God works. So the discipline came around this time as more of just like it's not when you feel like it that you're gonna find that intimacy with God, but if you can just on the daily increase some intimacy with God, that just helps the relationship all the more. So I think that's how I've experienced my relationship with God becoming more intimate and closer. So what would you say your experience would be?
Yeah, I like saying that too. Is the systematic bringing order to it, because that's what I see the disciplines doing, is they just giving this framework for which the relationship to operate, because God is a certain way, and He's revealed Himself through His Word, and then through knowing that why that even matters, that He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That brings this personal feel. I remember last year's playoffs, or maybe a couple of years ago, when is actually they're interviewing a Minnesota wide receiver football player, Stephon Diggs. He had thanked God, and then they interviewed Case Keenum, but he thanked Jesus. But that was the first time I'd actually heard a football player thank Jesus specifically. But it hit me in such a different way to not just say God. And usually when people say God, they mean the Christian God. So it wasn't like Stephon Diggs wasn't saying that, but there's something about being specific about there's no, because he was thinking had a different view than the Christian God when he said God, but there's really not much avoiding that when you say Jesus. That really zeroes it in. So that's why I brought up the thing about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is that once you have this framework to then operate, what God isn't, you then get to find out what He is, and then to laser in and zero in more about what God is. There's just so much joy and peace that comes in. It's like this. I mean, I came to this belief that this is the creator of the universe, and then to learn all the ways He truly does love me. So that's what I'm saying, is that when the word just explodes off the page, because it does that for me, because it was something my heart was either wrestling with or I was struggling in that day, and that word just feel like it God even propelled it into my sight to be able to comfort me with that. So I'm saying that when I personally experience that, it becomes more than that. Here's God just teaching me how He's like, but here's God actually showing that He cares. And so those have been really impactful moments of just understanding who God really is, just the nuance in His character, but also the order, like you brought up.
Okay. Yeah. So another thing that I think is important to kind of just be able to do is to stay committed, right? So, I shared with you too, right? Like when I was pretty devout and praying all the time and fasting all the time, that took a lot of commitment, right? And so obviously with that, you're not always going to be feeling it, right? You're not always going to desire to be disciplined with these disciplines. So I think something that would help me just be committed was just the desire to know God, right? Like I think just having that desire to know Him, because I think it also helped that I was young in my faith, but to know that God is vast and God is, as I would later hear on in my circles, like we can say God is like a diamond, right? Like there's so many facets and cuts to Him that, I think the way you say it is like nuance, right? Like you can always learn some type of nuance when it comes to God. So that makes the search, all the more, I guess, exciting or worth it. So that's been a good reason to stay committed. And then even just, like I said, with our sports background, man, like you just got to be disciplined, man, because the more you do it, the easier it gets. You start seeing the benefits, the results too, right? Because I think I'm just results minded, oriented as well. So once I started seeing results, man, I'm just like, all right, like, all the sacrifice, all the discipline's worth it now, and I see momentum building in my relationship with God. So what do you what helps you in those cases?
It's kind of the common theme I've been sharing too, is just like these kind of intimate moments I'm having with God through his word. But it's honestly remembering those moments, like specific things, if something just jump out, or even like the random connection points I have of just kind of understanding why God had him do that thing. Like the last thing that stuck out to me pretty much in the Bible of Leviticus that I brought up a lot, that the Israelite that had the Egyptian father, the Israelite mother. So it's even the fact that it's even listing the dude's parents. It's trying to say something about intermarriage. It's trying to comment on that, but he blasphemed the name. But even just it's classifying God as the name and him blaspheming that, and then how that obviously was a mortal sin that led to capital punishment of them stoning to death. But what they had the listeners do, anyone that heard him blaspheme the name, they had to place their hand on his head as he got stoned to death. But just such a graphic picture of something that actually happened in human history that God sanctioned, but just the specific reasons how he went about it and how intense it was and the reasons behind it. Like I said, all I was saying, either those little nuances, but not so much of like, oh, you could see even me highlighting that as such a barbaric event that why would God allow it? But when I see the most barbaric thing that ever was allowed, Jesus on the cross, that word you'd said near the end of like you're sitting excited, I was like, maybe he's not going to say it, but then he said worth it. That was actually the big phrase that says what he paid on the cross in order for us to have a relationship with him. He's shown what he's willing to give, and not just, he's not about these little petty sacrifices that, what he requires more is obedience. This heart that is contrite about him, that wants to know him more, like you were expressing earlier, that's
Yeah,
what he desires, and that he was willing to initiate the sacrifice of what he's calling us to do, that because that's who he is. He's this giver. So for me, it's really remembering those past experiences. And so I journal a lot too. So that's something I'm trying to incorporate into my disciplines, is actually a discipline of recapping, but doing weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly recapping of my journalings, to see times that I got very emotional. I was doing heartfelt prayers for myself in my journal, but going back to my journaling is as like an actual tangible thing I do to try to stoke current desire to continue with the disciplines that I enjoy.
it's good. Never thought about that. I have to implement some of that as well. So I know we mentioned a few here, but I'm pretty sure there's like more disciplines that we probably don't know of. So I know there's one that I've heard. It's just like this idea of, because I've heard meditation put out there, so I don't know if that means, if that's the same thing as prayer, right? Like you meditate when it
Yeah.
comes to prayer, but um, there was another one that I heard where it's like just being able to be in solitude, just
Mm-hmm.
being able to practice being alone. And so I know that's maybe a discipline that I don't do that I would like to explore. So I'm thinking maybe, you know, I know in our own accountability, we talk about me needing a rest, because that's something that I really struggle with. And so maybe this could be something that's more helpful. It won't be like escapism, like doing something for escapism. And this would be more focused and spiritually minded, and allow me to just rest in a way that, would help my soul instead of just, resting just for the sake of resting. So I think that's a discipline I'd like to explore more, and maybe even just that journaling. I think that could be a discipline as well, right? Just being able to journal and kind of log, the journey that I'm going through, and the thought processes and emotions that come with it, just to see if I can get some sort of clarity or strength from it.
You
I don't know
normally
what it
don't
helps you.
journal when you read the Bible? You normally don't journal?
Um, not to like kind of what is it you're doing? Like you kind of like audit yourself every 3 months or something like that. Just you
No,
know,
that's when I recap the audits in the sense of like when I do like the kind of intellectual study when I'm writing out my observations. That's when I do a little section called heart where I just give a status update about how I feel. So
gotcha.
whatever rest, then I write that out.
Yeah.
You don't do that when you
No,
read your.
I don't do the recap. I do take notes and stuff, but nothing like let me
See, well, I
recap.
do that pretty much every time. Or if I have the time for it, I always do that
Okay.
little recap. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm thinking even more just to kind of like just even log how I'm growing spiritually, because uh, I'm all about context, right? So I like to look at my past, and present to kind of just see the growth of where I've come from. So I'm thinking maybe that could be something beneficial to, maybe just the way you stoke your desires that way. I think that would stoke mine in that way.
Mm.
So I think those are like two that I can think of right now, and I'd honestly like to see if there's any more that we don't know of, just to see if
Yeah.
those would be intriguing enough to start incorporating into everyday
Yeah.
disciplines. So I don't know. What are there any that you're thinking about?
Dude, that's what's funny. And share answers. Mine are exactly the same. Is
Oh,
like
really? Well, here we go, dude. Didn't even.
prayer in general, but yeah, that's what it said. Listening
Nice.
prayer, yeah, and then solitude. That's what it says. Like actually just sitting in silence, but
Yeah.
listening while doing that. Yeah, that's something I don't do. That yeah, I definitely want to joke because, like I said, that my big kind of like big focus right now is just because I have had majority of my life or just my life to this point has been so much about just devouring the Bible and understanding more. I now want more, and I have, but through the initiative, like I said, and giving, but express what I've been learning. But I want more. I want more application about what I know about God. I want more being. I want more doing. I've kind of figured out some structures of the world, and kind of some staples, some foundation, a firm foundation about who God is. And now I want to start launching. So I think that's what's so tough about me, though, is I think that's what incorporates when, especially if you're just in solitude, you're just in solitude. But that's
Yeah.
kind of the staple of when you're doing a listening prayer is that you kind of do the Eastern meditation of you just empty your mind. But I think that's the balance of like the Western mindset is like what I really enjoy of like filling my mind with knowledge, reading the Bible. The Eastern is emptying. But
Wow.
listening prayer is you empty your mind in order for God to put revelation in it. But it's not a personal, tangible thing. It happens spiritually. So really there's a trust value there. But that's why I feel like God in our relationship, He's leading me towards is to trust Him to that level. Because like I was saying in episode 1, hanging out with the house church I do, one family that I see elements of power and faith demonstrated all the live long day.
Okay.
And Paul has called us to eagerly desire the gifts. And I think this is my little baby step into desiring what types of gifts could activate in my life. The fact that I have God dwelling in me in the Holy Spirit. And I want to be more spirit led. I feel I have a
Yeah.
pretty solid framework of how I see it. But that's honestly the tension of why these things haven't happened in my life, because I do enjoy such the tangibility of seeing words and connecting them, and like in my free time rhyming them, and creating these pictures of God.
Yeah.
I'm finding too this struggle of actually living out that relationship of trust, of not having the tangibility and just trusting that in the spirit God's going to move. And then even like a personal security in my thing that I'm going to discern Him correctly, because we know there's not just God's voice that's speaking to us in this world. We have other voices that want to be God for us. That's
Right.
even the thing about evil. Evil doesn't know it's evil. It wants to be God. It thinks it's good. It thinks it's going to be the right voice to speak to this human's voice. But there's even a lack of trust for me to do the listening prayer and the solitude of, can I discern? Do I love God enough? Do I know Him well enough to know it's Him? So I find
Yeah.
that's been a struggle, but why I also want to explore those avenues.
Nice. So I guess the last point I want to bring is like, so I think there's like a way to go about disciplines, right? Because I don't know. I remember growing up, Um, I kind of just did them just to do the disciplines because it was like the right thing to do. I remember, um, when I talked about in my testimony of like when my dad was pastoring, I remember that was like my first time experiencing uh, fasting, and so we kind of got we kind of got forced into fasting, right? So like
Mm.
we wouldn't do like a whole day fast, but I remember at like 6 years old, we were already doing like these half day fasts. But I was a kid, so I didn't know what I was doing there. But I think like that just kind of goes to show you, right? I mean, I think maybe more as adults, like people who may be new to the faith may not know how to go about, disciplines and stuff. So like maybe there's like a focus on how to do these things. It's more of just like experiencing it for the first time, and maybe if it's a bad one or a boring one to start off, people would be what would you say, unmotivated to do it again. They'd be like turned off to do it again. Um so I think maybe just like the focus of going about it, maybe if you have like already like a negative view, or think it's going to be a negative experience, maybe not to like focus on that, but maybe focus more on just like the possibility of God being able to show up during or through these disciplines, because that just allows it to be more of a relationship, right? You're not just doing it just because you're forced to, or just um, out of sheer boredom or something like that. Um, so maybe just being able to focus in that way, like you are seeking the God of the universe, and this God of the universe is full of awe and wonder. I think that's allowed me, especially like when it came to fasting, knowing like I'm about to put my body through some suffering right now because I'm going to be hungry and weak, and just I'm going to lose energy throughout the day. But the fact that I know that I'm like flexing spiritual muscles after this, that's kind of been a good focus going in, and being able to like complete these disciplines. So I'm just curious, what do you think would be kind of like the right focus going into disciplines, or what have you, or how do you go about it even?
Yeah, so it's still going with that idea that disciplines are like this framework. But my biggest thing is, especially with Bible reading, is that have a plan and know when you need to deviate from that plan. Because
Okay.
right now, my plan with reading the Bible is I'm reading the first 5 books backwards. Especially like, I had that great experience with Leviticus that was really impactful, that picture and everything went down with that, dealing with the blasphemer.
Yeah.
But there were some dry parts of just getting through just very technical writing about dealing with certain civil laws of ancient Jewish culture.
Yeah.
That the biggest thing I do was is mainly from just hearing friends talk about different scriptures. That when I was, you saying earlier, like there was a certain dryness and staleness, people had a bad experience, was letting that. I'm still reading the Bible, so I'm staying within the framework. I'm reading the Bible. It's not like I read other texts, but within that framework I had of like, I'm going to read the Bible, like, and I have a plan, but because those times I would experience staleness, that's when I would jump and then go read a different part of scripture just randomly, just to kind
Yeah.
of reboot things, get my mind kind of focused on a different topic, and then get back to the plan. But that's always been my motto. That's been very helpful. The saddest part is like I've had that motto that I think is a good one, like have a plan, don't want to deviate from the plan. But times that I've kept in this like just too structured mindset, like, but this is the plan, even though in those moments, like I definitely need to deviate. Those are times that I've continued to have those dry moments when I haven't gone with the right vibe. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is to know that these are here for a reason. These are tried and tested and true, that these disciplines, but that's always been my thing is like, yeah, understand ways of how this is done, have those ideas in your head, like this is a way that's worked, that's going to do well. But honestly, it's when it's hit that part where you feel like you're hitting a wall, you're hitting that dryness, that's when it's time to get back Eastern, open your mind back up. It's like, what are some ways, what's a different way I could go about this?
Yeah.
Or is this something I should even do? That's when you should be completely open-minded. It's like, that's really where you have the back to basics talk. Is like, hey, is there a better way to do this, or should I just scrap this at all? It's like the fight or flight. Should I continue to fight for this, find something new, or do I even do this? But again, read the Bible. That's a pretty safe bet. I think that's something you need to keep on doing for a long time. But other disciplines, I think, the ways you go about it, there can be more extremes, different kind of poles you can reach about, how open you can get about it, like especially with prayer. About, because that's even a controversy within churches. Is this too Eastern? Of actually trying to listen to God. Could prayer actually be a two-way street?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like, I kind of see prayer as like, hey, God's talking to me through his word, and then I talk to him through prayer. But some people do have more dynamic views of actually hearing the voice of God flow through them. But really, that's been a big season for me. But that's something that I've naturally, because I've seen the benefits of other disciplines, it's made me less receptive to try out others. But now that I've gotten to a confidence, I feel I'm almost amplifying that discipline by trying others. So I think that's a big thing too. A good mindset to see is that all the disciplines they synergize. They work well together. They're not supposed to compete. You're not supposed to just pick one side and scrap the other. You're supposed to see where you personally are drawn to, but see they all have their time and place. I think that's the biggest thing too. See the big picture. That's always my whole thing too, even breaking down things of West and East. It helps give the big picture of why these things are, and then why you're wired a certain way to like one or the other. But say, just because you like one of these aspects doesn't mean the other one's evil and has no benefit. But I think that's the kind of good concluding mark, is that it's always good to see the big picture. Even like I gave the Leviticus analogy, like if someone saw that was too graphic, we see the bigger picture of what really was trying to get across about God's character is the cross. And is when you see that big picture, is that you can see the entire Old Testament in a completely different lens once you have that big picture. So same thing with disciplines. Once you see how they can synergize and they build off each other, and how one can amplify the other, that can really help you to continue to just refresh it, being a renewing experience. But that is all I got with that. But do you have anything else to comment about the subject in general, or anything else that comes to mind?
Just one thing, just like a comment. I really liked how you said synergize, and so that's something I actually haven't thought about. It's just, I always felt like these were separate disciplines, right? Like you do these for certain reasons, right? But the fact that they are capable of being synergized, I think that's an interesting point. And I might even add that to my focus,
No, that leads up to a good point too, because I was part of Navigator Ministry. We're all about our tools, but the Navigators have this really cool analogy about the balanced Christian life called the wheel. In the center of that wheel is Christ, the center of your life. And then with that, there's these 4 different spokes, the top one being prayer, bottom one being the word of God, then fellowship, like I was saying, hang out with other Christians, evangelism, like I was saying, initiate. So even my first principles I listed were based on some of the concepts of the will. So evangelism, reaching out to non-Christians, hang out with Christians, hang out with non-Christians, and then the entire will that holds it all together, these spokes, Christ being the center, is obedience. So being obedient, and all those 4 big disciplines that you can get all these subgroups that we talked about. We talked about different types of prayer, and then me talking about giving was like an element of fellowship. That's a way to, like I said, it created a need that builds fellowship. But I really like the wheel analogy. It just puts it almost like I was bringing up to Christ on the cross. Like Christ is the center of how this entire life moves and breathes. But the Navigator's wheel illustration is a very simple and easy tool to remember the basics of the Christian faith as far as spiritual disciplines.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what me and Juan are going to get into, though. Further into it is this book. It's backwards on the screen, but it is a Dallas Willard book that I'd heard of his name, and Juan had read across from him his work, him as a philosopher, Christian philosopher, from a friend. So he listened to it on audiobook, and that's what has led to the creation of this episode, is to kind of give an overview of me and Juan's view of spiritual disciplines, what has encouraged us, what we struggle with, all these things. Because like we were talking about too, of our more topical approaches to the Bible, we're actually going to go a very systematic approach, how we dissect it into this book, and just have chapter by chapter videos. And we are excited about just chopping up those chapters and just sharing all little insights. We've done this previously with 2 other books, Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis and Lay It Down by Bill Tell. So we're excited about jumping into Renovation of the Heart. That's what that backwards lettering said on my computer screen by Dallas Willard.
Yep. So that's it, man. I think we're going to wrap it up here. And so this is going to be episode 2 of Chop It Up, talking about spiritual disciplines. And so I'm Juan Escobar. This is my friend Austin, and we're out.
Yes, sir.
Till next time.